put salt in your kitchen and see God's magic. Listen to me for a moment. I'm just a poor soul standing on the side of your busy life, but I've seen things. I've felt things money can't buy and power can't explain. You walk past me every day, thinking I have nothing, but I've learned secrets in my hunger that the full stomach often forgets. You see this salt, this small ordinary thing, you keep it in a jar, you sprinkle it without thinking. But what if I told you it's not just for taste? What if I told you it carries something deeper, something pure, something that pushes away what you cannot see? I have slept in places where fear whispers at night, where darkness feels heavy, where hope feels far away. And in those moments, I learned sometimes the smallest act of faith becomes the loudest prayer. A pinch of salt in the corner, a quiet heart, a whispered belief, and suddenly the air feels lighter. You don't need riches for this. You don't need a palace. Just a little faith and a simple act. Put salt in your kitchen, not like a ritual of fear, but like a sign of trust. Like you're saying, I may not see the way, but I believe there is a way. Because blessings don't always come with noise. Sometimes they come quietly, like peace entering your home without knocking, like worries leaving without goodbye. I've seen people with everything still feel empty, and I've seen people with nothing smile like they own the world. The difference? Faith, small, stubborn faith. So when you go home tonight, don't just cook, don't just eat. Pause for a moment. Look at that salt in your hand. And remember, even the smallest thing, when filled with belief, can change the atmosphere around you. I may be standing here asking for coins, but today I am giving you something instead, a reminder that miracles don't always shout, sometimes they sit quietly in your kitchen, waiting for you to believe. Listen closely, because what sounds small is not small at all. People think power comes from big things, big money, big houses, big voices, but I have learned, sitting on broken sidewalks and watching life pass by, that the greatest power often hides in the smallest acts. A pinch of salt, a quiet whisper, a moment of belief. When no one is watching, these are the things that carry weight in ways the world cannot measure. You see, the world has trained you to ignore the simple. You wake up rushing. You eat without tasting. You move without noticing. Salt sits in your kitchen like it's nothing. Just another thing among many things. But what if the problem is not that it is small? What if the problem is that you have forgotten how to see? Because when the heart is distracted, even miracles look ordinary. I have seen people chase after signs in the sky, waiting for something loud, something undeniable, something that forces them to believe. But belief doesn't begin with thunder, it begins with a decision. A quiet, almost invisible decision inside you that says, I trust, even if I don't understand. And when that decision touches even the smallest action, that action begins to carry meaning far beyond itself. Think about it. When you hold that salt in your hand, what are you really holding? It's not just grains, it's a moment, a chance, a point where the physical and the unseen meet. If your heart is empty, it remains just salt. But if your heart is awake, if your faith is present, then that same salt becomes a symbol, a declaration, a quiet statement that you are inviting something greater into your space. I have slept in places where the night felt heavy, where fear sat beside me like an unwanted companion. And in those moments, I didn't have riches, I didn't have protection, I didn't have comfort. All I had was small acts, a whisper under my breath, a tiny gesture, something that looked meaningless to anyone else. But I learned that when you put sincerity into something small, it becomes louder than any noise in the world. You don't need a stage for faith. You don't need an audience. In fact, the most powerful moments happen when no one is there to see them. When you take something as simple as salt and place it with intention, you are not performing, you are connecting. You are saying, without words, that you believe there is more than what your eyes can see. And that is where the shift begins. Not outside, but inside. Because the real change is not in the salt, not in the kitchen, not in the walls around you. The real change is in your awareness. When you start to treat small things with respect, with intention, with belief, your entire way of seeing the world begins to transform. Suddenly, you are not just living, you are not just living, you are not just surviving, you are sensing. The air feels different, your thoughts begin to calm. Your heart starts to open, and it doesn't happen because something magical appeared out of nowhere. It happens because you allowed yourself to believe that even the smallest action matters. People underestimate this. They laugh at simple acts. They say, what difference can this make? But they don't understand that life is not built on one big moment. It is built on thousands of small moments stacked together. A small act of faith repeated, felt deeply, believed sincerely. It begins to shape your reality. I have seen people change not because something big happened to them, but because they started paying attention to the small. They started speaking gently instead of harshly. They started believing quietly instead of doubting loudly. They started treating simple actions like they mattered. And slowly everything around them began to shift. Because when your inner world changes, your outer world cannot stay the same. You think the salt is doing something outside, but what it is really doing is reminding you of something inside. It is waking you up. It is calling you back to a place where faith is not complicated, where belief is not heavy, where connection is not distant. You don't need to understand everything for this to work. That's the beauty of it. Faith is not about having all the answers. It's about being willing to trust without them. It's about taking a small step even when the path is not clear. And that small step, that's where the power lives. When you place that salt, when you pause for a moment, when you allow your heart to speak instead of your fear, you are doing something the world cannot see, but the world will feel. You are shifting your energy, your focus, your direction. You are choosing belief over doubt, intention over emptiness. I've seen people with hands full of wealth, but hearts full of emptiness. And I've seen people with nothing in their pockets, but peace in their souls. The difference was never what they had, it was how they believed. It was the way they treated, even the smallest parts of their life. You don't have to change everything overnight. You don't have to become someone else. You just have to start. Small, that's it. Start where you are, with what you have, a pinch of salt, a quiet moment, a simple belief. And don't rush it, don't force it. Let it be natural, let it be honest. Because real faith is not loud, it is steady. It does not need to prove itself, it simply exists. Over time, you will begin to notice things you didn't notice before. A sense of calm where there used to be anxiety, a feeling of hope where there used to be heaviness, a quiet strength growing inside you that no one can take away. And you will realize it was never about the size of the act, it was always about the depth of the belief. That's what the world forgets. That's what people overlook. They keep searching for something big, something obvious, something undeniable. But the truth is, the most powerful things are often the most simple. A kind word, a patient heart, a small act done with sincerity. These are the things that carry real weight. So when you think about that salt, don't see it as just salt. See it as a reminder that you don't need something grand to begin. You don't need perfection. You don't need certainty. You don't need certainty. You just need a little faith. And that little faith, when placed into even the smallest action, begins to grow. It spreads quietly, touching parts of your life you didn't even realize needed healing. It softens what was hard. It strengthens what was weak. It brings light into places that felt dark. Not all at once, not in a way that shocks you, but in a way that stays. Because anything that comes from something small, something sincere, something real, it lasts longer. It roots deeper. It becomes a part of you. And one day you will look back and realize that the moment you thought was insignificant, the moment you almost ignored was actually the beginning of something greater. Not because of the salt, but because you chose to believe. You think. Change comes from what you can touch, what you can count, what you can show to others. You think if you had more money, more comfort, more security, then everything inside you would finally. But I've watched life from the outside, from the edges, where people like me sit and observe, and I've seen a truth that many don't want to accept. What fills your hands does not always fill your heart. I have seen people step out of shining cars with faces that look heavy, like they are carrying something no one else can see. I have seen them talk, laugh, smile, but their eyes betray them. There is a kind of emptiness that wealth cannot cover, a kind of silence inside that noise cannot drown. And then I have seen someone with torn clothes, with nothing in their pockets, sharing a piece of bread with a smile that feels real, a piece that feels unshaken. That difference, it doesn't come from what they own, it comes from what they believe. Because real change, the kind that lasts, the kind that transforms a life from the inside out, does not begin with possessions. It begins in the unseen place within you, where your thoughts are formed, where your fears and hopes quietly live, that place, that hidden corner of your soul, that is where everything starts. You can decorate your life from the outside, make it look complete, make it look successful, but if that inner place is restless, nothing will ever feel enough. You will always be searching, always chasing, always thinking the next thing will finally fix what feels broken. But it never does, because the problem was never outside to begin with. I've had days where I didn't know where my next meal would come from, nights where the ground beneath me felt colder than my thoughts. And yet, even in those moments, there were times when I felt something steady inside me, a quiet kind of strength, a belief that somehow things would be okay. Not because I had proof, not because I had guarantees, but because something inside me refused to give up. That is the kind of belief that changes a person. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand attention, it simply stays. And when it stays, it begins to shape everything else. You start to see things differently. Problems don't disappear, but they lose their power over you. Fear doesn't vanish, but it no longer controls your steps. You begin to move with a certain calmness, a certain trust, even when life feels uncertain. People think peace comes from having everything in order, but real peace comes from being steady, even when things are not in order. It comes from knowing that your worth, your hope, your strength, they are not tied to what you have or what you lack. When your belief is rooted inside you, it cannot be taken away by circumstances. Money can come and go, situations can change, people can leave. But what lives inside you, what you truly believe, that stays with you wherever you go. And that is why some people can lose everything and still stand, while others have everything and still feel like they are falling apart. It is not about the outside. It has never been about the outside. You don't build a strong life by stacking things around you. You build it by strengthening what is within you, by choosing to believe even when it's hard, by holding on to hope even when it feels distant, by trusting that there is meaning even when you cannot see it clearly. This kind of belief is not something you can buy. It is not something someone else can give you. It is something you choose again and again in small, quiet moments. When you wake up and decide to face the day instead of running from it, that is belief. When you feel fear but still take a step forward, that is belief. When you sit in silence and remind yourself that you are not alone, even if it feels that way, that is belief. And slowly, those small choices begin to build something inside you, something steady, something unshakable. You don't notice it at first. It grows quietly, like roots beneath the ground. But one day you realize that you are not reacting the way you used to. You are not breaking as easily. You are not losing yourself in the same fears. That is when you understand that the real change has already begun. The world may not see it, people may not recognize it, but you feel it. And that feeling, that inner stability, that quiet confidence, it becomes more valuable than anything you could ever own. Because when you have that, you are no longer dependent on external things to feel complete. You are no longer waiting for life to be perfect before you allow yourself to feel at peace. You carry that peace within you, and when you carry it, it starts to affect everything around you. Your words become softer, your reactions become calmer, your presence becomes lighter. Not because your life is easier, but because your heart is stronger. That is the kind of transformation that cannot be faked. It cannot be forced. It comes from a place that is real, a place that has been tested and has chosen to remain open instead of closing off. I have met people who lost everything and yet still gave kindness. I have met people who had nothing and still shared what little they had. That kind of generosity does not come from wealth. It comes from belief, from knowing that what you give does not reduce you, that what you carry inside is greater than what you hold in your hands. When you reach that understanding, something shifts. You stop measuring your life by what you have. You start measuring it by what you are becoming, and what you are becoming is shaped by what you believe. If you believe that you are always lacking, you will feel empty, no matter how much you gain. If you believe that you are supported, guided, and capable of enduring, you will find strength even in moments of loss. That is the power of inner belief. It does not change the world instantly, but it changes how you move through the world. And when you move differently, your experiences begin to change as well. You begin to attract different things, not by force, but by alignment. Your energy shifts, your focus changes. You start to notice opportunities instead of only obstacles. You start to feel gratitude instead of only dissatisfaction. And all of this begins not with something outside, but with a decision inside, a decision to trust, a decision to believe, a decision to hold on to something unseen, even when the visible world gives you reasons to doubt. This is not easy. It is not something that happens once and stays forever without effort. It is something you choose daily, sometimes even moment by moment. There will be days when your belief feels strong and days when it feels fragile. There will be moments when you feel certain and moments when you feel lost. But what matters is not perfection. What matters is persistence. As long as you keep returning to that inner place, as long as you keep choosing belief over despair, you are moving forward. You are growing. You are becoming stronger in ways that no one can take away from you. And one day, without even realizing when it happened, you will look at yourself and see a different person. Not because your circumstances changed completely, but because you did. Because you learned that true change does not come from what surrounds you, it comes from what lives within you. And once that inner foundation is strong, everything else begins to fall into place in its own time, in its own way. Not perfectly, not instantly, but meaningfully. And that meaning, that quiet, steady sense of knowing that you are okay, that you will be okay, that is worth more than anything the outside world could ever offer.